Okay, vlog 19. Yes, this is another continuing series similar to the Scott Tran series about the study of terrorists and who they are, what's their makeup, and this pertains also to the religious beliefs and this kind of what I consider in terms of outreaching to the atheist community or people, free thinkers or skeptics or secular-minded people. There's kind of this maybe propensity to kind of blame religion first, or it's easier to accept religious explanations for causes of ill. And the scientific study of terrorism has kind of pushed that into another direction. It's another talk of a guy who is MD, PhD, former CIA agent, Marc Sageman. And I was just pointed to this by another fellow YouTuber, and I apologize. I'll put your name in the notes. I forget it now. But it's very interesting, and definitely should check out the first 10 minutes. If it appeals to you, I'll provide a link in the description box for the full video. So enjoy.
Bergen. It gives me a lot of pleasure to introduce my friend Dr. Marc Sageman, friend and colleague, the author of an excellent book, Understanding Terror Networks, and the author of also an excellent book, the new book, Leaderless Jihad. Marc is probably one of the very few people in the world who's both a qualified flight surgeon and a former CIA case officer. He's both a medical doctor and a PhD. He's a former, present and former forensic psychiatrist. Marc will speak for approximately 30 minutes, and then we'll take questions and answers. Please identify yourself when you ask a question, and in fact, Dr. Sageman will probably repeat your question just so the C-SPAN audience can hear it. So with that, Marc.
Let me get to the subject. Okay, well, my big point, if you want to study terrorism, is that you have to study it scientifically. And what I try to do is basically apply the scientific method to the study of terrorism. So you have to build a database, and then use that database to test various claims about terrorism. And I was interested basically at the specific threat to the United States. So the way I started was taking the 19 guys who did 9/11 as my index sample and just grew it according to whoever had any operational relationship with them. I accumulated about 400 or 500 biographies now on them. And because a lot of information is erroneous on terrorism, I try to base it on trial transcripts. And from the trial transcripts, I then went to the field to investigate myself. So now that I have the data, I can test the conventional wisdom about terrorism. One of the conventional wisdom is that poverty breeds terrorism, and so I kind of looked at the family of origin of the terrorists, and as you can see, they're mostly middle class, so they're not poor themselves. Another version is, and here you have various versions of the brainwashing theory. One of them is that the culture or the family brainwashed them, and so here I kind of looked at the background of the terrorists, and you can see very much that they come from a fairly secular background, secular families. Another version is the madrasa theory of terrorism, namely that if the culture didn't brainwash them, the schooling did. And the madrasa is basically an Islamic boarding school. And here again you can see that 87% did not go to madrasas, and those who did were basically confined to Southeast Asia mostly. So it's not madrasas. Another version is that it was easy to brainwash them because it didn't have much to start out with because they were too young. And here I graphed the age at which they joined a terrorist organization. And you can see that the average age is about 26 years. So they're not teenagers, they're very much young adult responsible. Another version is one of ignorance. And that's why it was so easy to brainwash them. So here I kind of looked at the educational level. The first column here, as you can see, is high school education. They graduated high school. Here some college, graduate college, master's, doctorate. 62% went to university, and this is much higher than even the American average, which is about 52%. So people say, so what? They go to university, but they study religion. Well, no, not really. If you ignore this, because those are the people who went to high school or vocational school, these are the guys who went to university, and you realize they're mostly in the technical field. It's mostly engineers. Terrorism has always been a problem of engineers, going back to the anarchists in 1872, where it was very much a faculty of engineering and medicine that generated the first Russian anarchist, who then went to Moscow to kill the Tsar a few years later. Another theory is that they don't have any jobs. And that's actually more complicated. Here I kind of graphed profession and semi-profession. As you can see, those two columns are higher than the unskilled labor column. But even though they were fairly well skilled, they were underemployed, relatively underemployed. And I'll come back to that. Now, a typical explanation for terrorism in the United States is that of sexual frustration. Yeah, I mean, that's what you get in the newspaper, and Muhammad was close to the 72 virgins, because this is also, of course, 72 virgin, or the testosterone theory of terrorism. And the argument is very simple. You know, those are Muslim, there's no premarital sex, and therefore they become so sexually frustrated that they literally go crazy and blow themselves up and people around them. So, you know, I'm an empiricist, so I kind of looked at, well, how many were married? You know, how many had access to sex, basically. And you can see that 73% were married. And usually in my audience, I have one or two doubters who tell me, yeah, well, you know, you can be married and still not have sex. So continuing my empirical research, I looked at how many had kids. And you can see 2/3 had kids, and they had plenty of kids. So the data actually refute the sexual frustration theory, and you can see that terrorists do not people do not become terrorists out of sexual frustration, but out of sexual exhaustion. You finally got it. Very good. Now, this is a Peter laugh. You know, if you have never heard Peter laugh, this is a typical Peter laugh. Well, sex has nothing to do with terrorism, it turns out. But if you label somebody a terrorist, you're willing to believe anything about that person. And my point here is that I would urge you to be a little bit skeptical and to use real data to test it. Okay, another theory is that they're just criminals. They're just psychopaths, sociopaths. And here I show that about 90% did not have any arrest record, no criminal record before joining terrorist organization. So in terms of criminal background, the vast majority, no crime. But there is some crime there, and that sample is becoming more prominent with time. And I'll talk more about that. But usually the crime, a petty crime, credit card fraud, drug trafficking. But what people usually mean by criminal, they mean psychopath, sociopath, what in clinical term we call antisocial personality disorder. For that to occur, for that label to stick, you really need to have a long pattern of criminal activities going back to childhood. You have to have a conduct disorder. And here only basically 2 people that I know in my sample had that, namely Zarqawi and Jamal Amidon, who was probably the chief of the Madrid bombers. Okay, so if they're not bad, are they simply mad? And as a psychiatrist, I looked at that, and I found very little evidence of mental disorder. I think 4 of 400 believe in genes, which are Islamic ghosts, and that's basically cultural consistent. But even if you look at it as a sign of psychosis, that still is 1%, and the worldwide average baseline on this, base rate on this is 3%. So you realize that they are healthier than the normal sample. no real personality disorder, no narcissism, and no real trauma. You know, usually they come from pretty good families. If you remember the picture of Muhammad Atta at the age of 12 sitting on his mother's knee, they looking at each other lovingly, that's basically the picture of a terrorist at the age of 12. Typical picture of terrorist. Okay, so if people are not born terrorists and they become terrorists, what is the process? And this is what I want to address right now, and that's what I address in my book. And I want to talk about three topics, namely the radicalization, the mobilization into terrorist network, and the evolution of the threat over time.